Let's dive into a story about how one team got hit with an absolutely impossible deadline and, somehow, didn't just survive. They completely knocked it out of the park. We're going to look at their journey, from the intense pressure of a new project landing on their plate right into a success story they could all be really proud of.
So how do you do that? How does a team take a situation that feels totally overwhelming and flip it into a huge win? That's really the big question we're digging into here, by looking at this team that did exactly that. They found a way through all the chaos.
All right, so our story kicks off the way a lot of these stories do, with a challenge nobody saw coming. And it didn't just show up in an email. Nope, this thing landed with a thud right onto the team's schedule.
Picture this. The news just drops. A manager walks in and announces that a super important project is being moved up, way earlier than anyone was ready for. You could just feel the whole mood in the room shift. The pressure was officially on.
And what does moved up really mean? Well, it meant they had to take this idea from just a concept on paper and turn it into a real, finished project in less than 3 months. Yeah, the timeline was just brutal and the stakes incredibly high.
But here's the thing. This wasn't just about working faster. The real test was about changing the whole way the team worked with each other. If they were going to have any shot at this, they had to learn to reach across some very old, very deep divides.
See, the project came with this non-negotiable rule. Total cooperation was a requirement, not, a friendly suggestion. For the very first time, designers, developers, and marketers had to break out of their little silos and actually work as one single unified team.
And you gotta understand, this was a huge deal. Historically, there were just these invisible walls between the teams. Misunderstandings, delays, that was just normal. So this project, it was a very deliberate move by leadership to force a change, to get people talking and collaborating.
But as anyone who's ever been on a tight deadline knows, when the pressure really ramps up, we all go back to our old habits. The team was about to face some seriously dangerous temptations to just get over the hard parts as fast as possible. And sure enough, with that 3-month clock ticking down, the first big hurdle popped up. A few team members tried to save time by just jumping over some really crucial steps, like detailed planning and early user feedback, hoping they could just rush straight to the finish line.
This is where the manager really had to step in. He reminded everyone that skipping over the details wasn't a shortcut. It was actually a direct path to failure. This was their big moment of truth. They had to decide to trust this new collaborative process, even when it felt painfully slow.
And you know what? That decision, it changed everything. The moment the team committed to the process and to each other, the whole dynamic started to shift, away from anxiety and into real, actual progress.
I mean, their journey was a complete transformation. It started with total uncertainty in that first week, but by the halfway point, you could see their confidence growing. As they learned to trust each other across those old divides, they weren't just racing to a deadline, they were building toward a massive success.
So in the end, when the whole team looked over the final results, it wasn't just relief they felt. It was this incredible, genuine pride. They didn't just finish a project, they created a whole new way of working together and turned what looked impossible into a shining example of what real collaboration can do.
Okay, so what can we pull from this story? Let's boil it all down into a few key ideas that any of us can use when the pressure starts to build.
First up, trust the process. For this team, that means sticking with their daily meetings even when it felt like a waste of time. Don't jump over the steps that build quality. Second, you have to be proactive about breaking down those barriers between teams. They didn't wait for permission, they just did it. And finally, you've got to see pressure as an opportunity. It's a force that can push a team into a much better way of working.
And all of that leaves us with one final question to think about. In your own work, on your own team, what's the wall? What's the communication gap or the divide that you can start reaching across today?